Hi, this is Lori from the Dream Center on Pine Ridge. I want to say good afternoon to all of you in Lakota land, and I just want to get on and say thank you for all the support of all the families and the children that come to the Dream Center, especially this summer. How you've supported your local Dream Center and how you have been such a blessing to us, and we've been so blessed to have the children this summer and all the teams that came to help us. And today is going to be a special day for the next hour. We have a guest who is Igor, and he's been here with us for the last 3 years, and his team, and we are going to talk about depression. We want to start a topic on depression and the things that we see and some of the things that the teenagers are experiencing and the adults and in everywhere, in every walk of life. Depression is a big topic right now. So we hope that you'll stay with us. We do have a special announcement tonight, and Drea is here to let you know what it is.
Hey everyone, come join us tonight in Wounded Knee for a barbecue. It's at 6 o'clock. Everyone is welcome. We hope to see you there.
So yeah, come out to that barbecue. The Dream Center is going to be sponsoring. We do a different community every week during the summertime, and this week it is in Wounded Knee. So right now I would like to introduce to you Igor. He is from Chicago, Illinois, and his team is with us this week. And I think he spoke on the radio here a couple of weeks ago and told his story of how he fell off of the mountain 150 feet, and he is a miracle. We love you, Igor.
Thank you. I'm actually very glad to be here again, and I know that we could look in my life, and I see that maybe I'm not better than anybody else. Maybe I'm not a smaller sinner than anybody else, but I saw the mercies of God in my life. I saw how God saved my life, and to me it was a miracle as well, because in theory I should have died, and when I look at that, I could only say that it wasn't because I was some kind of a special person, or was so good, or was so holy that I survived, but because God was so merciful to me. And so I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to everybody who helped out in that. And you might know somebody like Pennington County Sheriff, or Rapid City Life Flight, or Badlands Search and Rescue, Badlands Rangers, Olaga Tribal Police, I think, and law enforcement, as well as multiple other agencies that were involved, including the National Guard. So I'm very grateful to them, because they put in a lot of work into helping find me and then pulling me out of there. What we want to touch about today is depression. Now, depression is a very touchy subject, and I know many books have been written about it. Many psychiatrists and psychologists have talked about it, and people try to do different things to help people in depression. And unfortunately, our time is short, so we're not going to be able to cover everything in excruciating detail, because you need a lot of time, you need a lot of effort to cover something like that. We won't be able to help you completely as well, because sometimes it takes years to help person in depression. But what we want to touch about is a couple of different reasons, couple of different things that might be causing your depression, and steer you towards a solution. And if you are truly seeking help, if you're truly looking to get out of it, there is hope for you. It's not all hopeless. It's not completely hopeless. Even though sometimes when you look at your life, when you look at the state you're in, it seems like you're in a black hole. It seems like you're completely without any help. You're completely alone. But I want to give you a ray of hope that no, it's not that way. It's there is hope. There is an exit. There is a solution to your problem, and it might take some effort on your part to get out of it. And I hope you'll be able to find somebody to talk to that will kind of lead you to this process. But I want to say that there is hope. And primary hope that we have as Christians is in Jesus Christ, but we will touch on that a little bit later. Now, I know that depression is quite widespread, and it's if you look at United States, you will see that many people, even though you might walk past them on the street, and they seem happy and they seem content with their life, and seems everything is okay in their life, and you might look at their face and you're like, wow, this is a happy and content person. They have an amazing life. But when you look inside, when you look inside in their heart, in their mind, you will see the darkness of depression clouding it. And they put a happy face on in order to kind of hide that. But when they are alone, when they by themselves, they look at their life and they are terrified. And that's why we see things that people trying to block that alone time by different ways and means. And so possibly they find friends who they spend time with in a bar or in a casino, or they spend time doing something stupid, I don't know, causing some kind of chaos somewhere. But they look for this time with other people to fill up that emptiness that's inside of them. And when they can't find it, they look for different substances. They might find fulfillment trying to fulfill themselves in alcohol or drugs or some kind of other addiction. And this is all in order to dull the pain that's on the inside, in order to cover up that pain. And other people will look and they say, well, this person is happy. But in reality, it's not so. In reality, it's not so. And when you start to talk to a person like that, you realize that they are far away from happy. They are far away from content. They are far away from the happiness that truly will allow you to live your life in such a way that you will grow, and that you will develop as a fully content person. Now, according to a definition of depression, I'll just say here: state of low mood and aversion to activity that can affect person's thoughts, behavior, feelings, and sense of well-being. Now, there is different types. It could be a periodic depression. So let's say when winter comes and it's really cold and you sit in your house and you're longing for the sun and the warmth of the summer air, you can experience a periodic depression because you're like, well, I want the summer to come back. Maybe your girlfriend left you or your boyfriend left you, and for that period of time you experience a depression because you're missing that person. You look longing for them, and you're sad that they have left you alone. Sometimes maybe your significant other or your parent or your loved one has passed away, and when that happens, even though we try to cover that pain, even though we try to somehow dull the pain, it's there, and we all know it. We might say, well, they are in a better place, well, it's better with them now. But we all know that we go through this period of mourning where nothing really interests us, and everything is kind of bleak and sad. And personally, for me, I was here a little bit a week. 2 weeks ago, and I found out that a friend of mine passed away, and to me it was a big shock because honestly I didn't expect anything like that. He was only 47 years old, and it really did put me in I don't want to say a heavy depression, but depressed mood for a couple of days because it was a complete shock to me, and I didn't really expect to come back to a funeral. So something like that would really put you in depression. And now how you deal with that is a different story. It might put you in depression for a day or 2 days or a week or a prolonged period of time if you really take it to heart and don't deal with it properly. Now, components of the depression will include pain, anguish, hopelessness, isolation, apathy, anger, spiritual struggle, fear, anxiety, and I could possibly go on with that list. But I think element of each will be present in this. And so some people might feel, let's say they will feel a pain 80% of the time, and hopelessness 10% of the time, and isolation like another 10% of the time, or different combinations of each. And because we're humans and we are different people will experience depression differently. They will experience it differently. And so maybe you'll just fall into apathy where you don't care about anything. You don't care about your hygiene. You don't care about your house or how it looks. You don't care about how it looks outside. The grass is growing. Who cares? I don't care. Let it grow. The house is dirty and messy. Well, big deal. If I'm gonna clean it, it's gonna become dirty and messy again. That's kind of apathy. And so let's say you look terrible and you haven't showered for 2 weeks, but you're like, well, I'm gonna get dirty again. That's apathy. And so some people experience that, and then some people experience anger, so they get angry at everything and everybody. So things that normally would be simple, and you're gonna be like, oh, okay, wherever, I brush it off. For you, it will produce anger, and you're gonna make a big deal out of it. And some people go anxiety. They are afraid of different things. They are afraid that if they're gonna go outside, I worked with a certain person, and that person is experiencing depression. And talking to them, it's kind of interesting because they are afraid to go outside, but they are also afraid to remain inside, because they feel alone when they're inside. When they go outside, they are fearful of people. And I'm like, well, which one is it? If you go outside, you're afraid of people. If you stay inside, you're afraid of the loneliness that you experience on the inside. So that's another thing. Isolation. People isolate themselves and they really don't want to talk to anybody. And that's one of the things that I found out with this person. Many times that person would completely isolate themselves, and they will refuse to talk to me or anybody else, and they will not answer my phone calls. They will not answer my texts. They will refuse to talk to me for a long period of time, and then suddenly that passes away. And so they become so friendly, and they talk to me, and they are willing to discuss things with me and tell everything that's going on in their life, but only for a period of time. And so people go through these periods as well. Now, frequently, when we look at depression, people say, well, where does it come from? What causes it? And there's not one specific cause that could cause depression. There's not one specific cause. There's many different causes, but first I want to speak about organic causes. So, for example, Parkinson's disease or other diseases that could infect or impact us could cause, the side effects could cause depression in a person. A possibility taking drugs, especially depressants, will cause depression as well. Now, frequently doctors say that there might be a disbalance in your brain of different chemicals, but there's no scientific evidence whatsoever to prove something like that, because what constitutes as balance for me might constitute as disbalance for you, and what constitutes as balance for you might constitute as disbalance to me. There's no one specific set of this is how much chemicals you should have in your brain. And so when you're missing, let's say 10% of this one and 20% of this one, we could just pump you full of chemicals and you're gonna become fine, and you're gonna be okay. So that kind of falls away. Though I want to say that sometimes if a person is hurt and they might be paralyzed, it might cause depression. Because what I experienced when I fell off the cliff is, first of all, I was not able to walk without the walker and then without the cane for 2 months. And also, my left arm, it only moved a little bit. So part of it worked, and so my fingers would not bend. I could only move a couple of inches and move my fingers just a little bit. So I went for 2 months of physical therapy. And what was interesting to me is I realized how people who are paralyzed feel. Because when I was going through therapy, and Megan, my therapist, she had a board and it had pegs in it. And so the object what I had to do is I had to take the pegs out and place them on the side, and then I had to place the pegs back into the little holes on the board using my left arm, which didn't really work. And my eyes saw the pegs, my brain knew where the pegs were located, but my arm would not listen, my fingers would not listen, and so my coordination was completely off. And so I would try to pick up a peg, but instead of going to, let's say, 0.11, my arm went to 0.27, completely different location. And I was really annoyed, to be honest, because I knew how to do it, but I couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. And I realized, well, the person is angry because their brain knows. The brain understands how to do it, but the arm would not listen. And so this would cause depression as well, anger, depression, things like that. And so when you talk to a lot of paralyzed people or people with disabilities, you might notice that they might be a little bit angry and they might be not content, and this possibly the reason why. Now, there's also non-organic causes, and I think most of depressions, my personal estimate is probably about 85 to maybe even 90% of depression is probably caused by non-organic causes. So this probably would be called, I want to call it the heart problem. That's what scripture calls it. So I will kind of name a couple, or just kind of couple directions that could be the cause of what you experience. If you experience depression, or you know somebody who's going through that, what could be at the root cause of it is possibly some kind of a desire, perhaps even a good desire of something, and when the person cannot fulfill that desire, cannot reach that desire, it would cause a depression. And I think when we look at our lives, I think majority of the depressed mood you can look, well, I want this car, but I cannot afford this car, and you become depressed. I want $1 million, but there's no way I could get $1 million, and you become depressed. I want to date this girl, but there's no way I could date this girl, and you become depressed. Or I want to go out with this guy, and you there's no way you can go out with this guy, and you become depressed. And so different things that we desire, that we want, we cannot reach this goal, could cause something like this. Or a disappointment or expected disappointment, or due to unsatisfied desires. So let's say I expected a certain thing, right? So I look at something, and I decided I'm gonna buy this item, and I was so ready to buy this item, but suddenly something came up and my car broke down. And instead of using my money to buy this item, I had to fix my car, and I'm disappointed. I'm completely disappointed that I didn't get this item. Or sometimes you even expect a disappointment. You don't really have not reached the point where you're completely disappointed, but the expectation of it is causing you to become depressed. We will touch a little bit more on that a little bit later, right? And then symptoms that you would notice in a person like that. A person suffering from depression may experience loss of interest in responsibilities, relationships with other people, lack of energy, fatigue. They probably would have a poor appetite or overeating, one of the two. They will have insomnia, unable to sleep. That's the issue with my friend. They are unable to sleep. Or excessive sleepiness. They will just sleep for hours upon hours when people should be up. Poor concentration, difficulty in decision making, feelings of hopelessness and worthlessness. And they will materialize in something like, nobody loves me, nobody wants to have anything to do with me, I'm completely worthless, I'm human garbage. And as you think about this, this increases and increases, and it grows upon itself. It multiplies. It's almost exponentially multiplies through time, and this will put you into this death spiral. It will become deeper and deeper unless somebody really helps you to get out of it. It will destroy you. It will destroy you. Okay. I want to say, when we look at our friends, we look at our family, and we see people who have committed suicide. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, probably majority of cases, depression led them to this point, where the only exit and only valid, seemingly exit out of the situation, out of the pain, out of the hopelessness, worthlessness, was suicide. That was it. And if you really talk to that person, they would actually say to you, I just want to die. This is it. This is the only exit that I see. The only exit that the person sees out of their situation, even though that's not the only exit, even though there is hope, even though there is a way out, for that person, the only valid, seemingly way out is suicide. And suicide is not something normal. It's not something that should happen. It's not something that should be accepted in civilized society. We might make an excuse for that and say, well, it's better with that person now. Or make an excuse for that person, well, now they feel better, they have some kind of hope or whatever. That does not excuse what happened. And it's kind of covering for the terrible thing of suicide. It's kind of covering that up, saying that it's okay, it's fine, this is normal, they're in a better place. But in your heart of hearts, you know how much it hurt you, how really, really deeply it wounded you. And you know that will remain for the rest of your life. It will remain for the rest of your life. You know it. You just know it, and there's nothing you can do to take that away. I know that approximately 20 years ago, my dog was shot by my neighbor. And to this day, I remember the day like it happened yesterday. And this was just my dog. But what happens if your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife, your friend commits suicide? I think it's much more higher and much more deeper hurt than my neighbor shooting my dog. It's much more deeper. And if 20 years have passed and I still remember that day like it happened yesterday, I even remember the weather, I remember how it looked, I remember everything. I think this will remain with you for the rest of your life. This wound is much deeper than just a dog. Lori, would you like to say anything? I had been talking for a while.
Oh no, keep going. I'm very interested and I'm listening and learning a lot as well. But to work with the teenagers as much as we do, and we work with a lot of them, and we have them journal, and we also have them, they enjoy that, and they enjoy hearing the Word of God. And the one thing that I do tell them, which a lot of them have, they cut and they've had thoughts of suicide. And the one thing that I want to share, that I share with the teenagers, is it's such a temporary thing, that feelings bring on so many things, but they're temporary. And a permanent solution to such a temporary problem that you're going through, or a feeling that you're going through, is never the answer.
So Lori mentioned cutting, and I just want to digress on that because we see that a lot. And when I was going through a counseling class, and our teacher was discussing cutting, and so they were working with people who cut themselves, and so they tried to discover, and they kind of talked with multiple people trying to find out what compels them to go and cut themselves. What causes them to do something like this? And one of the things that they discovered is that the pain on the inside was so big, was so terrible, that the only way they saw to dull the pain is to inflict themselves physical pain in order to dull the mental pain on the inside. This is what they did. They cut themselves in order to make themselves hurt physically, to dull the mental hurt on the inside. And I think this kind of explains a lot of things with the cutting, because you try to hide it away, put it somewhere far away, and so what do? You hurt yourself in some way, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So, I think one of the problems that probably happens in our society is people kind of undervalue depression. And when they look at it, they kind of like, well, it's not a big deal. Get out of it. Snap out of it. Do something. Just get your mind off of depression and stuff like that. So they don't really pay attention to the problem. To the problem of depression. They kind of put it down as something insignificant, something small, and something not so important, right? But what we have to realize, if you're not suffering through depression, you have to realize that for people who are going through it, it's really a suffering. It's really, really hurts. It truly does hurt. They are really hurting. And if you put it down, it hurts them even more, because they're like, well, you're not realizing that it actually hurting me. You're kind of discounting my feelings, my hurt, as something insignificant, but you don't realize how badly it hurts me. And so this suffering, so Suffering comes from a couple different sources, I guess. Other people might hurt us. Other people might hurt us. In people who maybe we have trusted and they let down our trust. People who we revealed many things to and they completely destroyed our trust. Maybe it was somebody close to you, your wife, husband, your friend, could be dad.
Just to share a little bit, when a lot of the teenagers did not know my history and my past and a past of abuse, and to be able to relate to these teenagers one-on-one and to the men and women that do come to the Dream Center who have heard my testimony about how, I was abused by my father and I was abused by my first husband, and I've had a lifetime of abuse and a lifetime of mistreatment, living very poor, having to raise my children, being a single mom. And so those things, when we do sit down and we do talk with the people and people that come and look for help, and be able to share, hey, I went through it, and it was a temporary thing. Maybe I went through years and years of the abuse and then years of the struggle, but you find a way out, and God helped me find that way out. I didn't have answers for myself. I had to seek and try to work myself out of that situation, and He makes something so beautiful out of your pain. He will take something and make it so beautiful, even though now it seems like so dark and there's no way out, but there is. And I try to share them the dreams and the things that they can accomplish, because there is a way out. I'm proof of that. I've had my leg broken and my fingers broken, and I've been beat up pretty bad, and I was raised that way. And I had a husband who was on drugs and alcohol, and I had 3 children, years ago, and God has blessed me now. But all of those things, sometimes when you go through it, He's going to use you in such mighty ways to help other people.
Okay. One of the things that the Bible tells us, if you look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and I want to read this passage, and it says, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from the beginning to end. And so, I think one of the keyest passage in the Bible is this, regarding some idea of what kind of you're going through and what your experiences, what you're experiencing in your life, and the reason for this, because you're trying to fill this eternity that God placed in your heart. It says He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, right? So inside of you, it's eternity. And what does it mean? What is eternity? It's a boundless place. It is something that cannot be filled by anything except something that's eternal. And the reason why it's eternal is because God Himself is only eternal being that exists in the universe, and He put this hole in your heart to be filled by Himself, just by Himself, not something else, not anything else, but by Himself. And when you try to fill this hole by, let's say, money, fame, drugs, alcohol, for guys it could be women, for women it could be men, with worldly possessions, with anything else that is temporal, that's not eternal, you will not be able to. You will not be able to, because it's eternal, and this stuff is not eternal. And so you kind of like keep throwing it down this hole, thinking, well, one more bottle of alcohol and it's gonna satisfy me. One more hit of a drug and it's gonna satisfy me. One more female that I could gain, it's gonna satisfy me. And guess what? It doesn't satisfy you. And you sit there and you like, well, why? I tried all of this stuff. I tried all of these things and I collected all of this stuff. And I will make a suggestion. If you own the Bible. There's a book in the Bible called Ecclesiastes. It's towards the middle of the Bible. Look her up in your index. It's a fairly short book. It only has 12 chapters, right? And it's fairly short. A couple of pages here. 1, 2, 3 pages in the Bible I have. But one of the things that he did, and he looked for meaning of life, right? And Ecclesiastes was King Solomon. He was a son of David. And when he was young, he prayed to God, and God said, well, ask wherever you want, and you will receive it. And what Solomon asked was, he asked for wisdom. And God said, because you asked for wisdom, I'm going to give you everything else and add on top of that. And so Solomon has became the richest man in the world that ever lived, right? Because if you look at the wealth that he accumulated, and it's kind of difficult to convert into current money, but we can kind of get a glimpse of the wealth that he had, because during his days, silver was counted as nothing. It was just like stone, like you can pick her off the street and nobody really cared. That's how much wealth he had. It says that in 1 year, just silver that came to him from different, gold that came from him from different locations. It was in our weight. It was over 40,000 pounds in 1 year, and this is not counting the other gold that came from merchants and came from different kings and stuff like that. So over 4,000 pounds of gold each year. If you don't think that's a lot, go see how much 40,000 pounds is and how much it's worth these days. It's a lot of money. He had the entire country. He had the entire world wanting to see him, so everybody came to see him. He had 1,000 wives. So if you think you're gonna be happy with 2 wives, this guy had 1,000. He had everything going for him. And he realized, he said something in chapter 1. He said, yet when I surveyed all that my hands have done, and when I toiled to achieve everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. When he looked at all of this stuff, all the gold, all the silver, all the wives, all the things he collected, all the cities, and you can look at chapter 2, all the groves, vineyards, he had singers, and he had flocks and herds, silver, gold, men, women, everything he collected. And when he looked at all of that, he said, everything's just meaningless. Everything's just meaningless. He tried to fill his emptiness with all these temporal things, and even though he collected so many temporal things that nobody else was able to ever to collect and will never be able to collect, he came to a conclusion that everything was just meaningless. And so that's kind of gives you a little bit of a perspective. Maybe you looking at your life and you're realizing that you trying to fill up your emptiness with these temporal things, and you're like, well, even though I'm trying so hard, I'm collecting so much wealth, I have so much money, I have a nice car and a beautiful wife and a beautiful children, my family is going amazing, I'm still depressed. What's wrong with me? Maybe because you were searching for the wrong things to fill up your emptiness. I want to make a couple suggestions. Unfortunately, we don't have the time nor the ability to help everybody. You have to work. Person to person on something like this, and you need like heavy consultation. And maybe my suggestions would be very poor in your situation, but they might point you in the right direction, so you can kind of be like, well, I could go this way, and I might be able to get some help. But I'm hoping that at least for one person, at least for somebody, this will help in some way. Right? And my suggestion to people going through depression was always to figure out the root cause. And it's sometimes very difficult to do. It might be extremely difficult to do. But there has to be some kind of root cause that trigger this depression within you. And so you have to look back at your life and see what has thrown you into this. And in order to rise up, you have to remove the root of your depression. Why? Because sometimes you have a tree and you kind of cut it down, but you leave the root in, and then a year later you see a new tree growing where you cut the old tree. This is what happens when you leave the root. Yeah, you might remove the symptoms of depression for a little bit, but you do not remove the cause of the depression. And so time will pass and it will come back again, and you will cut it down. I know we have a plant growing by my neighbor's yard, and they have been trying to exterminate this plant for a while. Even my dad helped once. They cut the plant completely down, everything, and so a couple days ago my dad was showing the plant to me. He's like, man, look at this, the neighbor, she cut down the plant again, and it's so big now again. And he's like, I spend so much time cutting this thing down, and it's like keeps regrowing, and it regrows bigger and bigger each time. And I was thinking about it, and I realized, well, they cut the branches, but they leave the root. And the root is deeply entrenched, and so it keeps coming back with new branches. And until they actually put in the work to remove the root, the plant will keep coming back. And I'm pretty sure when I come back, it's going to be bigger than when I left here. So you have to figure out. And I will make a couple of suggestions to look into your history. See if you can kind of track back history of your depression. So maybe you will see this started about 10 years ago. And this started approximately when my mother passed away. And passing away of my mother threw me into this depression that I'm going through still, even though this happened many years ago. Or your child passed away, or your father, or your significant other, or your brother, or somebody from your family, or very close friend. Or something happened that, let's say your house burned down, and after that you started experiencing depression. Try to figure out approximately the time where it started. Also, if you can't find something that happened in your life that could cause depression, there's really no traumatic events, nobody died, but you still experience depression, you have to look into your family history. And the reason why is because sometimes spiritual things cause depression as well. So let's say your grandmother was a witch. This will pass onto you as well in some cases and will cause depression in you. And so you have to investigate the family history to see what happened previously that could have impacted my life today. And this is more of a spiritual matter, but as we all know that previous happenings of our ancestors have impact on us today as well. They have impact on us today as well. Also, look in your life and see what kind of difficulties or problems that you went through. What kind of addictions you went through. What kind of maybe physical pain that you went through that might have contributed and caused the depression. Also, one of the very important things that you have to look into is see what kind of role does God play in your life? What kind of role does God play in your life? And if He's completely somewhere on the side, if He's far away from you and you don't really think about Him in your daily lives, you have to realize it's very important that God should play an important role in your life, because He will start working on your heart in order to change you and bring you out from the state that you are in. Find somebody that you can actually trust. Find somebody that you can speak to and tell them about this. Somebody that you know will help. Somebody that's not gonna go spread this, what you're going through, to your neighbors and your friends, and be a tattletale amongst your village or your city or your friends, and everybody knows what you told them tomorrow. No, somebody reliable, somebody who will keep their mouth shut and won't tell everything to everybody. And I guess be patient a little bit. Sometimes thinking through these things will take time. It won't happen overnight. It won't happen right away. Sometimes you have to really think to figure out what happens or what happened in your past. Realize something as well, that sometimes if you're going through depression, this kind of will characterize you. I'll read a quote from by Ed Welch. And he said this: in most cases of depression, most cases of depression are characterized by paradoxes. You cannot stand loneliness, but it plunges you into depression. At the same time, you avoid people. You ask for help, but not always willing to listen. You believe in God, but feel like an atheist. And that's very true with my friend that I was working with. And I asked them, does this describe you? And they were like, yes, this completely describes me. And so that's really encouraging sometimes when you look at other people as well and see that they went through something like this. You can take from what they went through and learn a little bit. Now, Bible would be a very beneficial book for you to read as well. Bible would be a very beneficial book for you to read as well, especially Psalms. I would recommend Psalm 41, Psalm 42, Psalm 41, 42, possibly Psalm 72, things like that, because they will give you hope. They will help you out, because people have went through this as well, and so their experience could be very helpful to you. They could rise you up and encourage you as well, because you will see that, hey, I'm not alone. People have experienced this before me, and they went through this somehow. And they were able to get out of it. Lori, maybe you could comment on that, because maybe you have went through some of that. What can you say? Especially like getting out of depression. I think you can kind of comment on that there is hope.
There is hope, especially when I remember I was 20 years old, 20 years old, and I had left home when I was 17, and I was wandering, and I met a man who did not know that he was abusive, and that he was on cocaine and everything else, and he was a Vietnam veteran and had all kinds of issues. But growing up, I was looking for the same kind of man that my father was, because I felt like I was not worth anything. And I think that's the most critical thing about depression is the feeling of that you're not worth anything, and that there's not hope, and that you're only worth for someone to beat you up, and you're only worth for someone to abuse you and call you names. And as I grew and as I got older, and I had 3 children, I kept being beat up, and he was committing adultery every week, and it was a hard thing. But when I look back now and I see that the journey, that God sees everything, God knows everything, and when I see the salvation of what the Lord did and how he brought me out of that, but if I had taken my life, I would never be here today, and I would never have the opportunity to help so many children. I would never have had the opportunity to know a man that was good to me, or to have a happy life, or to have my granddaughter sitting next to me that's healthy and whole. And so there's so many things ahead of you. And so I just say to all the people out there that can hear my voice, and that you feel loneliness, or you feel depression today, or you feel suicidal today, I know what that feels like. I know how to be left, for dead, or to be left and kicked aside and rejected.
I wanna say one of the things I think possibly that will help you the most. There's multiple ways to go through this. I think we might take a phone call or two if anybody wants to call in and ask a question. We'll be happy to answer it if we could possibly can. Or if you're not able to, we'll promise to look her up and answer it later. But I would encourage you to serve others. People who might be in a worse situation than you are. And maybe you have food on your table, and maybe you have a house and a roof over your head, and you have a car or something like that, and you look at others, and you're still depressed, right? But you have to understand there's people who don't have food on their table. They don't have a house. They are completely hopeless. And so when you start serving people like that, you will realize maybe my situation is not as bad as I thought it was. I took a person to Haiti once who was depressed. And after going to Haiti and looking at the living conditions of people there, and people who don't have food, and they don't know what they're going to eat tomorrow. They don't have electricity. They don't have running water. They don't have anything. And this person came back and he said, well, this is much worse than I ever thought. This is much worse than I could ever imagine. And in a lot of ways, his depression kind of went away, because he realized that there's people who have it much worse than he did, and helping people who are more in need. And personally, for me, I kind of realized something like that, because when I went to therapy, I saw people who were without their legs, without their arms, really people who were hurt badly. And I looked at that, and even though I couldn't walk that well, even though my arm didn't function properly, I realized that these people were in much worse shape than I was. And there was a guy, and poor guy, he was in an accident. He lost both of his leg, and he had just stumps for his legs. And I looked at that, and I wanted to cry, because I realized he won't be able to walk normally anymore. And he would be in a wheelchair his entire life. And maybe I was hopping with my cane for a while, but this guy would have to be in a wheelchair. And that kind of changed my perspective on life in a lot of ways. And I hope that what we did here today maybe help out somebody. Maybe you listen to this and you're like, wow, this is what I needed to hear. I truly hope. I would suggest that you go get a Bible and read Ecclesiastes. And it will help you out a lot.
Well, we've only got a few more minutes of airtime, so if anyone wants to call in or anyone needs prayer, we would be glad to pray with you. But I would like to pray with everyone out there that is having any thoughts of suicide or depression, or just feeling like hopelessness, that will it ever get better. And we would just like to pray with all of you. And Father, I just thank you for this opportunity and this time to be able to speak the truth and to be able to speak to so many hurting people. I want to thank Kili for sponsoring us today, God. And I just want to give you the praise, Jesus. And Father, you know those out there that can hear us. You know those out there that are hurting. You see everything, you know everything, God. And so we're just going to lift them up to you in the name of Jesus. Cover them, Father, in your grace and your mercy. Father, I thank you, God, that you are going to speak life into them. And Father, I pray that you give them wisdom and you give them understanding. And Father, most of all, that you will give them hope. The only hope that they have is in you. And that you, Father, can change everything for them. That you, Father, will be the one. Father, I thank you, God, that you have even given us the opportunity to be here to help the children. And so, Father, we just ask you to keep the children safe on this reservation, Lord. And Father, keep the teenagers safe. Protect their minds. Protect their coming and their going, God. Watch out for them in the community. Father, this nation needs you. This nation needs your peace. This nation needs your joy. Father, this nation needs you. It needs your richness and wholeness and grace and mercy. In the name of Jesus, I